Good evening again, everybody. Good to see you. Jason DeFalco, I'm the superintendent. And I have the privilege and honor of introducing some very important people with us this evening. You are all here because you clearly are very plugged into the work that we've been doing as a school building committee to help look at the feasibility of doing something different with the building that we're in currently, the high school. Although a lot of those messages and emails and things come from me, I'm really just kind of the deliverer of the information and a member of the school building committee. But truly, this project is a community project. The schools belong to the towns. I just have the honor and privilege of doing my best to run them each and every day. But these are your schools. And so I cannot thank you enough for being here this evening to take really kind of the first step in what we're referring to as an educational visioning aspect of our feasibility study. I won't get into the entire timeline with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, who is our funding partner in this project. But if there is anyone in the audience that is feeling anxious about any sudden changes in the school landscape as far as construction, if there's anybody that is anxious about any sudden changes in tax bills, although that is not my specialty, please know this is an incredibly slow and long process. This is more of a marathon than a sprint. We started this project in, I think it was 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. Okay, so Greg will go through that. Please know this is a very slow and a very long project and process. There will be no sudden moves, so I don't want people that are maybe tuning in at home or those of our friends in the audience worried about those changes coming too quickly. But with that, I'm going to introduce Greg Smalley, who is with DRA Architects. Greg has been with the district for quite some time and helped us with our initial facilities assessment of our overall school system that actually helped lead us to submitting our statement of interest for a new high school. So, Greg, I'm going to kind of turn this over to you, and you can walk us through our next steps.
Thanks, Jason. I'm Greg Smalley with DRA Architects. With me, Jim Barrett and Angel Kazadian, who are principal in charge and project manager, respectively. And if I can get David to advance the slide, I'll tell you what we've been doing. He's eating pizza. You had a job, just advance the slide. You know, you bring the best people in, but they have a specific job, they do it well. So as Jason said, it's been a while. We started actually in very late 2020, so we put it down as 21. And that was to assess the facilities throughout the district, look at the physical condition, and start to determine what might be necessary to keep the building safe and code compliant and suitable for an educational use. We turned that study in, and from that, the district made some steps forward in terms of how they were staffing and positions that they had that are necessary in order for the state to participate in any type of funding of a project moving forward. In 22, we undertook a district-wide master plan. And the master plan is where you take what you know from the facilities assessment, the condition of the buildings, to the strategic plan for the district, where the district wants to go educationally, and you tie those two together. So now we're looking at how appropriate are the buildings that you own for the way you want to teach, both now and moving forward. Coming out of that master plan in 23, we wrapped that up, and the district put together what's known as a statement of interest. And that gets submitted to the Mass School Building Authority once a year, typically at the end of the year, fourth quarter. And by about the second quarter of the following year, you find out of the historically about 100 or so districts that submit, about 12 to 14, 10 to 14 get selected. And in 2024, Blackstone Millville was notified that they had been selected to move forward. That's a big hurdle in the legislative process or the regulatory process to get accepted in. Once we got to that point, I always say we because I've been through the district for so long that it's my district too now. Once you get past that point, you then have to put up your part of the funding and you have to create a building committee and a couple of other regulatory pieces and paperwork to file. In January, the district hired what's known as an owner's project manager, which is required in Massachusetts for anything that involves more than $1.5 million in expenditure. And we hired Collier's project leaders. Very well-known firm, a lot of depth, a lot of experience, and very adept at moving a project along and making sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted and things get done. In January of this year, DRA was retained. We've been at this as a firm for a little bit over 100 years and doing schools almost exclusively for about 65, 66 years now. Have built across the region, not only in Massachusetts, but Connecticut, Rhode Island, and further north and west. We came on board and started into our work. Where'd David go? Can you get me the next slide? I'm so demanding sometimes. Okay, there you go. So MSBA Module 1 is funding the study. That's where you ended up in 2025. Module 2 is hiring and forming the team. That's where I left off. Module 3, which is where we are now, hence the green star. And here we need to develop an educational program, which is what you're going to be part of tonight. And in this, you are helping the district to understand and helping us and David and everybody else involved in the design team to understand how you see education working and how it impacts the building that you build and will own. The building that you're going to design and hopefully construct has to have a core structure that can work for 50 years. This building was built in '69 and opened in '70, so it's 55 years. So it gives you an idea what we're looking at. And then you go on to Module 4 after that, which is the actual development of a preferred schematic design. So at this stage, we are looking at various options of what might work. One of those will be selected by the school building committee and the Board of Education as the preferred schematic. We'll develop that in Module 4. And then Module 5 is funding the program, funding the construction. That would be the beginning of 2026, you would most probably be doing that. And then it would go into construction, which in this case, we're allocating about 3 years, a year for design and 18 to 24 months for construction. So you would look at a building that would open in August of 2029 from a starting date back in 2020. So it's about a 9-year process. And you're just coming up, you're about, hit or miss, a year away from being asked to decide whether or not you want to fund the construction of the project. So on that, if there's any questions on process, because that's the last time we'll spend something this boring, I'm going to turn it over to David Stephen, who will introduce himself, and then we'll get into the fun of the night.
All right, thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. Yeah, so my role on the project is what's called an educational programmer or planner. And I am, oh, hi, how you doing? I recognize you from the little box in Connor, right? Yeah, great. Great you could be with us. So my role as an educational planner is to help facilitate what we call a visioning process that helps the architectural firm, where you're working with DRA, to get to know you as well as possible and to understand how to give you your best building solution. And so tonight what I wanted to do is to talk to you about the visioning that we've done so far and to ask you to contribute your ideas and dreams for the school program and for the facility. And so we've done 2 out of 3 workshops with a group we call the Educational Visioning Group. And that group has about 28 people in it, and it's a range of people we have students, we have a number of students, we have teachers, we have administrators, parents, and community partners. And so that group has been meeting now for 2 times for 2.5 hours each. We did virtual workshops. I'm going to share with you some of the highlights of the things that have been prioritized, but it's really all about learning from you what what's most important for you. So, and just my background, I'm a school design architect and I work around the country, but I think maybe more importantly, I worked as a high school teacher for 10 years and an assistant principal for 10 years. So I'm really interested in how the life of the school is real, and your forward-thinking vision about the programs you want for it is supported by the building that we can help you design. And so I'll talk a little bit about the what educational visioning is all about and how we've approached it. And then I'm just going to start sharing some of the priorities, and I'm going to ask you to share yours. And I'm just going to skip ahead right now to a slide that this is Mentimeter. This is an interactive program for anybody that has a smartphone with them, or if you have a laptop with you. If you go take that QR code, get that QR code, that's going to bring you to the presentation that I'm doing right now. And it will allow you to give your feedback on each of the slides, because I'm going to have a bunch of prompts that I'm going to feed to you. And what's really nice about Mentimeter is that it's completely anonymous. We don't know who is sending in what, but we also get your thinking in your words. And then we can look at all of the different themes that are coming up, and we can check back for understanding and say, did we get this right? This is what we heard. These are the kinds of things that seem most important. All right, so when you get there, you'll see down below, you'll see a heart, a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a question mark. Just hit either the heart or the thumbs up. It's if you get to the page there, you can see we got like 9 people now, 11. That lets us know that you're there. If you would prefer to give us your feedback analog, or just like through, there is note paper on each table and some pens. So if you have at any point problems with Mentimeter and just want to give us your feedback, I'm going to be giving some very simple prompts. You can always just like write it on the paper and just make sure that your writing is legible so we can understand it and transcribe it. Okay? Anybody having a problem getting on here? Yeah. Are we good? Are we good? All right, good. So I'm going to step back then to a few slides just to give a little bit more context. So, yeah, so we are in Module 3, as Greg was saying, and this is the feasibility study, where we want to learn as much as possible about the district and what you value, what you do now, what you want to do in the future. And so we have this series of 3 workshops with a group we call the Educational Visioning Group. Plus we do a community workshop, and there will be more community workshops. And we did a faculty workshop this afternoon and may do another one next week. In addition to that, Greg and his team from DRA are going to be on the ground here working with the faculty to really get to know on a much more granular level what it is that is most important to them and how they do things on a day-to-day basis. This process is much more high level. So we focus on the people and practices. What do you do? How do you support your families, your students? What are your practices now? Like, what programs are most important for you? How do you see them evolving? And I know a bunch of you were here just now to hear Jill talk about the academic and career pathways that are pretty exciting taking place here. So how can this building really support that vision as well? We also talk about design patterns. I'm going to share those with you a little bit later. Those are ways of thinking about space. All of us went to school and we all feel like we know what a school is, right? It's a collection of classrooms and hallways and big ticket spaces like your cafeteria and your gym and your auditorium. But we really want to think about how do we use every square inch of a building to get you your most effective and flexible building possible that is going to last for 50 or more years. And so, and then the last workshop that we're going to do with this group, which is going to take place here in this room on March 12th, we're going to actually do plans with this educational visioning group. We're going to do plans of how they imagine the school being laid out. So the first 3 workshops that we did with the leadership team and then with the educational vision group were all virtual. And then we did the faculty and this community meeting today, and then on the 12th, we'll do an in-person meeting as well. As I said, it's a mixture of people. We always try to get a variety of folks involved in this conversation, but it's just the beginning of the conversation. So I really want to emphasize that nothing that we do here is set in stone. This is all trying to, again, learn as much as possible. We want to sort of encourage people to think outside of the box, share ideas about what schools are doing what new schools are looking like, spark conversations, but it all comes back to what's important to you. We don't want to do something that's trendy. We want to do something that's timeless and essential and that really reflects who you are as a community. Now, as part of this feasibility study, and this is really the 10,000-foot view, right? We're looking at your educational and your architectural priorities, and we're using those as lenses through which to look at all of these different options. So as part of the agreement with the Mass School Building Authority, we're going to be exploring either a grade 9 through 12 school for 365 students, or grades 8 through 12 for 470, grades 7 through 12 for 580, or grades 6 through 12 for 680 students. So those are the numbers that we're working with. The priorities that we're establishing are agnostic. They apply to all of these. And in addition to all of those different options, we have to look at what if we just do a base renovation of the building? What would that involve and how much would that cost? How about if we did a renovation of certain parts and then an addition for other parts? Or what about new construction? And we're going to look at all of those models with all of those different numbers. So there's lots of different alternatives at this point that are going to be explored. So we can come back to the community and say, these are the things that, the considerations for each of these different options, and what do you think? So we're going to be using Mentimeter in a minute, and you'll see that we'll be able to share kind of the thinking that's going on here. I realize this screen is a little bit small, but you should be able to follow along on your phones if you're connected. As I said, nothing is set in stone. This is like a brainstorming session, so we want to encourage people. This is the time to be really aspirational. There's lots of opportunities to make lots of compromises along the way as we go through the different design stages of this building. So if you are comfortable, please share your name and your role affiliation within the district. We're just trying to, keep track of who's participating in these meetings. So you just type it out and press submit. All right, I'll leave this up for another 15 seconds in case you haven't pressed the button yet. Oh, and I should say, we're going to leave a half an hour we're going till 8 o'clock tonight, and we'll be sure to leave a half an hour at the end for question and answers, okay? So please save your questions until that time, and hopefully, there'll be a lot of interesting stuff to look at in between. So now I'm going to ask to share your greatest hope for this project, whatever that is. What would you really like to see come out of this project? Sure.
I would like to see a proper band room and for music.
A proper band room for music.
We can,
All right.
we can host
Yeah.
other schools.
Yeah.
And also a field that we can perform.
And a field to perform. Okay. Thanks, Margaret, for offering that. And anybody should feel free to voice what are some other greatest hopes that people have. And also you can be sure to share it here so we keep track of it. Anyone else want to share? Any of our students? I'm gonna give you this, Izzy. Oh, that's my daughter's name.
To have like a better auditorium.
A better auditorium. Okay, like more updated, better stage lighting, stuff like that. All right, great. Thanks, Izzy. Anyone else want to share? So some of the things, in case you can't see them coming up here, we've got a new functional building, updated learning spaces, a sports training center. I'm not going to read them all, but we will be sure to keep track of them all. Modern learning facility, promoting community work, sports and fields, highly efficient facility that will support all of the BMR programs. I want to say that one of the things that we definitely think about when designing schools now that we didn't think about before 50 years ago, 55 years ago so much when this building was designed, is that the school is a community center and that it is safely accessible after hours and on weekends, and whole parts of the school can be completely blocked off from those other big ticket items that are really resources for the community, like the auditorium or the cafeteria or the media center or maybe some of your shop classes or things like that for adult education. Functional school structure that supports children and educators. Since Blackstone has a great music program, I agree with the idea of a proper field with bleachers and floodlights. STEM labs and makerspace. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. Connor, did you want to share something?
A larger welcoming area.
Okay. So like at the when you first come in? Mm-hmm. Yep. We're going to think about that. That's one of the design patterns that we look at, like greeting and gatekeeping, and what's your first impression when you come in? How safe does it feel? How do you know how to move through the building or get to the main office, things like that. All right. I'm going to keep us moving along, but I'm not going to get to every one of those, but because we have a lot of prompts to share to give you. So this is part of this process of visioning is that we're developing a narrative. So as part of the Mass School Building Authority, Module 3 requirements is that the district writes what's called an education plan. And those are like 80-page documents that detail all of the different things that you're doing now, what you imagine doing in the future, and how the spaces that you're requesting from the MSBA are going to support that. So, so this is really a lot about developing the language for that. The MSBA has a space template. It's going to look at all those different populations of students, like 680 students. It'll spit out a spreadsheet. It knows exactly how big your cafeteria is, how big your gym is, how many classrooms it's going to help you fund. But how we organize those spaces and the push and pull and how we organize some of that square footage, there's a lot of creativity that we can sort of plug into there. And we're going to build on all the good stuff that the district has already been doing. As Greg was saying, and Jason, this has been going on since 2019. We have the facilities assessment, the district master plan. We also have things like your portrait of a graduate and your student expectations, your academic and CTE pathways. So all of those are going to factor into this conversation. So I'm about to ask you I have three different prompts. One is what your biggest educational priorities are in terms of the kind of programs that you envision going on here that you think are going to be best for your students. What your greatest architectural priorities are in terms of either what spaces in the building or qualities of space or the kind of building you envision, and then what your community priorities are. As a community, what's most important to support your needs. And before I ask you the first one, which is your educational, I'll just say a few things. So like a lot of schools, and districts, you have a portrait of a graduate that incorporates what we call the 5 C's, right? Which are higher order thinking skills. So we know that mastery of core academics is what it's all about. But we also know that in order for kids to be more kind of proactive, confident learners, we need to give them the opportunity to practice citizenship, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and character. So these are things that we know the school is really thinking about. They actually all have implications on the building level. But we started looking at that. We also started looking at the career pathways that you have now and that you're envisioning for your future, and how that plays into ideas about what spaces might be near each other. And we asked your leadership team and the educational vision group what educational focus areas were most important to them. And there was a lot of alignment in both groups. They listed like their top 16, and their top 5 out of their top 6 were the same. Student-centered learning, and some of this is kind of education-ese, right? Like education, like every profession, has its own language, right? So student-centered learning means that it's not only the teacher that is in charge of the learning, right? Distributing the ideas and the learning, that students are taking an active role in constructing their own learning, and they're engaged. Academic and career pathways, so ways that the content that different subject areas come together to connect to kind of real world contexts and problems that kids can solve, or careers that they might be connected with. Hands-on and project-based learning, this is nothing new, but because of those 5 C's, the only way to allow students to practice those higher order thinking skills is to have them actually do stuff, not just like passively, but actively work on projects. So project-based learning is something a lot of schools are thinking about. Mastery of core academics is what it's all about. And then college and career planning. And as I know, I was here at Jill's earlier presentation, and she was talking about some kids are going on to 2-year, 4-year, the military. It doesn't matter. We want to make sure that we're showing kids what the options are and helping them find their best path forward. And then the last one is deeper learning, which is, in addition to like AP, which is really great and which you have a good amount of here, are there opportunities to go really deeply into something, to really develop your passion and to really get excited about learning? So those are some of the things that came up. And then we also were looking at, with the group, what are some of the benefits and the challenges if we really think about bringing the middle school in. And the biggest challenge for many schools going through this process is thinking about how do we make sure we don't lose the middle school identity and the whole experience of being a middle school student, which is different than being a high school student. So we think about having a completely separate middle school zone with shared amenities and really controlling how that interaction takes place between middle and high school students. At the same time, some of the benefits that we discussed were, well, it gives you a new or completely renovated facility for all of your middle and high school students, not just your high school students, right? There would be fewer transitions. There would be increased kind of academic and extracurricular opportunities for both high school and middle school students because you've got a larger population. And so there's more opportunities. And exposure to career pathways for middle school students, streamlining of special ed and administrative services, and cost efficiency of sharing a building and your HVAC system. So those were some of the things that came up. And then one final thing before I ask you about your educational priorities. These are just some of the highlights from the educational visioning group. When we took all the different feedback we were getting, these are some of the big picture themes that came up. Being safe and inclusive for all students, really supporting career pathways and preparation for future, taking a holistic approach, so it's not just about academics, it's all that great extracurricular stuff as well, including athletics and art and performance and stuff like that. Flexible and adaptive learning environments. Social emotional learning, which is a big educational term these days, SEL. It's about kids learning to be part of a community and feeling a sense of belonging and ownership. Core academic skills, of course, and skills-based learning connected to projects. Collaborative learning and learning how to work in a team, and extracurricular and presentation skills. So with that, I'm going to ask you to actually, before I ask you to sort of record all the things that are important to you, just talk to people that are next to you for 2 or 3 minutes. When you think about the things that are most important to you educationally, what are the things that come up for you, okay? Okay, let's take about 30 seconds to wrap up your conversations. And in the meantime, if you want to start recording some of your ideas, I'm going to put this up. So don't let all those good ideas go to waste. Make sure we get them recorded here. You can submit as many times as you want. Don't worry about spelling. And I'll just tell you, we are going to be having another slide for architecture for spaces. So I know it's tempting to talk about spaces here, but think about connecting it back to the kind of educational priorities that are important to you, like collaborative learning as opposed to collaborative spaces type of thing. Spaces are fine, no problem though. And I'm not going to get to every one of them. I'm going to say a few of them as they come up. So more bright and colorful, place, movable plus comfortable chairs, advanced technology. We know that technology is going to continue to play an important role. Hands-on learning a must. Options for the future. Collaborative learning opportunities. Up-to-date science lab, cross-pollination between high school learners and middle school learners. Yep. Interactive teaching, allowing kids to be involved. Agricultural learning, space for clubs and activities. More deeper learning, shop classes. Project and competency-based skills, or competency-based learning, technology, life skills. Learning options that fit the way the world has shifted. And I think that connects a lot to the work-based and skills-based learning that seems to be very important to people. Anybody want to share with the group any of the stuff that they're thinking about? I'm going to press a button here and we'll see. This is something I like about this program. We can see all the different themes that are coming up. So we got a lot of stuff around hands-on learning, collaborative learning and spaces, technology integration, flexibility, real-life learning opportunities. All right. Going to leave this up for another 60 seconds or so. Well, there's a tendency to think big. Let's not lose sight of small, intimate educational classrooms where students feel support and safe to participate. Yes. So first of all, you have a great teacher-student ratio here, right? Which is really, really something enviable. We want to make classrooms a little bit larger because it's not just traditional stand up and deliver teaching that's happening there. We want to also be able to do small group learning there or move all the chairs and do something more active. Also, there are oftentimes multiple adults in a classroom with paraprofessionals or specialists that are also assisting in the classroom. But at the same time, we want to have intimate spaces. We don't want just big. We want to have quiet spaces where you can get focus. So it's not all collaboration all the time by any means. We want to definitely, and we definitely want to create a sense of small school community. So if we do go in the larger 680, right now that. For a middle high school, that's not a huge number, but it's different than what your kids are used to in terms of the numbers of students in the middle and high school. So we definitely want to create smaller learning communities within that where kids feel a real sense of being known and belonging, right? So, so those are all the things we're going to be thinking about. Okay. So next we're going to talk about architectural priorities, and I'll just say a few things. Some of the overarching themes that we think about when we're designing schools these days is that your classroom is still the basic building block, right? But we're also looking at all the in-between spaces, because if a building is fully wired, and this building will have a really robust technology infrastructure, then every square inch of the building can be used. So we want to think about small-scale community, large-scale community, varied spaces that are active and quiet, and how those spaces are connected together. We want to support community use, and we want to think about departmental versus interdepartmental organization. So a lot of middle schools have an interdisciplinary organization, right? They've got their middle school cross-discipline kind of teams, but a lot of high schools are organized more that way now, or at least not just all the science classrooms in one place, all the math, all the English and social studies, because when you're doing more real-life project work, that's not how it works, right? There's connections between those different disciplines. So that's, again, we're going to be listening to you. It's going to be organized as you want it, but those are some of the things that we think about. The other thing I want to, before I ask you what you want for your building, I want to encourage you not to get caught up in the weeds of things that any older building like this is just like really low-hanging fruit, right? So any new, or if you've ever done a renovation, it's like, this is like a gut renovation, right? New wall systems, new window systems, new HVAC systems. Any new or renovated building is going to be fully ADA compliant. Every space in the building has to be accessible. It's going to be thinking about safe entry and security. We know that's a big part of the conversation. It's going to be passive and active measures of security. It will have cooling, because we know that buildings are used throughout the summer now, as well as heating that works. And modern technology and furniture, and that furniture is ergonomic. It's going to be different sizes to fit different bodies. Well-sized classrooms with natural light. You have a lot of classrooms here that don't have natural light. That's very difficult for teachers and for students, and there's research that shows how it affects student performance. So we're going to try and have natural light in all of the classrooms, and those classrooms will be slightly larger and really agile classrooms. And we'll also think about what we call borrowed light, so windows from hallways into classrooms, always with a blind for a lockdown situation, but so you can get some of that borrowed light inside to the interior of the school. Other things that we think about is special education needs to be distributed throughout the school, unless it's what we call a sub-separate program. We want safe drop-off and pickup, where we separate pedestrian and bus and car traffic and bicycles. There's going to be a high level of sustainability just by mass building codes now. You have to achieve a LEED rating or what we call mass chips, but we can go even further. And a lot of buildings now are net zero or net positive. Distributed and gender neutral bathrooms. We're going to be having more bathrooms throughout the school, and some of them will be gender neutral. And all of your big ticket spaces like your CAF, your media center, athletic spaces, music, fine arts, performing spaces, they're all going to be multi-purpose, so that they can be really used flexibly. So this is really an opportunity to kind of think big and think aspirationally. Here are some of the priorities that the Educational Visioning Group talked about. Of course, flexible, agile classrooms, collaborative and flexible learning environments, student-centered design. We talked a lot about branding and identity and kids being able to exhibit their work and really feeling a sense of ownership of the place, like a blank slate that they can work on. Performance and art spaces, including community and event spaces. Health and accessibility in general, connections to the outdoors, sustainable features, improved athletic facilities, better hallways and traffic flow, and just general comfort and functionality. So I'll let you now talk to your neighbors about what's most important to you on the design front, and then in a few minutes we can start recording them. All right. If people could wrap up your conversations in the next 30 seconds or so and start sharing on Mentimeter some of your great thoughts. I'm also just wondering, because it is interesting to hear as a group, what are some of the themes that are coming up? I know over here we were talking about traffic flow, right, and drop off and pick up, which is a bit of a mess right now, and working on that. Other themes that came up? You can just yell it out. Security, yeah, 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 and we're just, that's something where it's top of mind for all of us. And part of security is also what we call ideas about defensible space, so that the building itself doesn't feel anonymous when you're walking through it, so that you have sets of adult eyes on you at all times, and that there's interconnection. It's that informal supervision and surveillance. Yeah, yeah. Other themes? All right, so I'll list some of the things here. A creative makerspace labs, usable all-day outdoor learning space. We've talked about that needing to be, it could be like an outdoor classroom, but we would also want shade or protection from the elements. Athletic facilities, I see a bunch about that. A large gym, potentially with subdividers, welcoming entry, community spaces. More about outdoor multi-use spaces, beautification and landscaping. A big theme that's come up in our workshops has been the courtyard, and how much people love the courtyard and want the courtyard or some version of it, or something maybe even larger. So we'll definitely be thinking about that. Wireless internet availability, for sure. More resources to make the school a community attraction. Bathrooms near the auditorium. Calm spaces for students, library, but not totally technology-based. Yeah, libraries these days are really multi-purpose spaces. They've got quiet spaces within them, plus a really more space for collaboration. They usually have breakout rooms. And if you have, that's oftentimes where a STEM program, like your Project Lead the Way program here, is located near there as well. Efficient heating and cooling to lower operating costs. Solar, definitely, so photovoltaics are part of the equation, or geothermal. We'll be looking at all that. Keeping the character of the buildings. We talked a lot about community aesthetic and the importance of whether this is a new or renovated and new building, that the aesthetic is something that really the community feels belongs to them, that they're proud of. All right. Okay. We got one more of these prompts, and then we're gonna dive into looking at some nice pictures of different kinds of school environments. So this one is really more specifically about what's really important for the community. And so for the educational visioning group, these are the themes that have come up. So being accessible and usable by the community, being able to block off whole areas, future ready planning, making sure we're doing this right so that we're taking into account that the building is going to be able to accommodate the needs for decades to come of the community. Pride and identity, flexibility and security, continuing your whole child focus. All kids can find things that they're passionate about here. Spaces for community events, integration with the community, lifelong learning opportunities, which could be like adult ed classes as well, mentorship, cross-grade interaction, sustainability as connected to gardens as well, and showcasing like display and exhibition of student work and projects. So with that, I'll have you turn again, and you can talk to some new people in back of you that you haven't talked to yet if you want. And share your ideas. What's important for the community? All right, folks, let's wrap up those conversations and share some of your ideas up here so we can all see them. So what do you think is most important for the community? All right, so I'll name some of the things that are coming up. The idea of a community hub, where the community really sees themselves, has an identity, serving as an entertainment venue with an auditorium for community dance and recital. Also, place for the Boy Scouts, sports fields, spaces outside, like CPR training, scouts, and sports. Showcase student success in sports, band, academics. Bringing community inside the building in safe ways. Athletic space that can be utilized by the community as well. Multi-purpose spaces for community use. Yeah, I'll tell you that a lot of the times the cafe areas in our building, when we get to the design patterns I'm going to show you, we think of it as the heart of the school. And these are really beautiful spaces that are great venues for large gatherings. So a lot of schools are using them as revenue generating as well. They rent them out as event spaces and they've got great acoustics and really nice aesthetics. So something to think about. A flexible space to build a sense of community involvement and pride. Clean, easily managed space that can be maintained for over 50 years. Safe and inviting, encouraging community's participation, a community garden potentially with horticulture class in the school, supporting after-school programs. Yeah, we think about that after-school programming. A lot of times, one of the things that comes up a lot is about storage, which seems like a very, it's just a practical thing, but it's very important. Locked storage. And when you think about those after-school programs, that's what they need, whether they're taking place in the cafe or in the gym or whatever. But also, if you're doing a lot of project-based learning, you need storage for materials. And if you're sharing classrooms, you need locked storage for different adults to use the space. Night events, classes, mini auditoriums for community sessions, presentations, town meetings. Yeah, we often think about having multiple kind of sort of display presentation venues within the school, not just the auditorium, which is a much more anyway hierarchical and formal kind of way to do a performance. So we can think about that as well. All right. So we're going to jump now into talking about design patterns, and it's 7 o'clock. I'm not going to give people a break here, but if you need to get up and move around or use the restroom, just feel free to do that. We'll stop by 7:30 to open up for Q&A. And hopefully you'll all be able to see the screen here. If you want to come closer, please feel free. So what we do in these workshops is we like to introduce a variety of what we call design patterns, just design approaches. Some of them you may really like, some of them you may not like at all, and that's the whole point, is we want to expand people's ideas about what's possible, show them. Most of the designs here I'm going to show you are buildings that have been designed and built in Massachusetts over the last 5 to 7 years, school buildings. And there's a lot of overlap between them too, so it's all about defining that common language. So what we did is we presented 36 different design patterns to the educational visioning group, and we had them rate them individually, which I'm going to ask you to do as well, because you can follow along these slides, and at the bottom of each one, wait a minute, is a heart. Well, you'll see the heart, thumbs up or thumbs down or question mark. So as I go through the design patterns, if you really like it, put the heart or the thumbs up. If you don't, it doesn't really do anything for you, put the thumbs down, or if you don't think it's good for your context. If you don't really understand it or need more information, you can put the question mark. You don't have to respond, but it's just nice to have you all kind of interact with it. So first, the slide I'm showing you here is we showed 36 different patterns, and we had people rate them individually. And that's on the left side of the list is the top 16 patterns. So those are the things that, in priority order of how people voted on the things that, how many hearts and thumbs up they got. On the right side, after we introduced them all, we had people get into breakout groups with 5 or 6 people. And we had 5 different breakout groups of 5 or 6 people. And every time a design pattern appeared on a list, they had to make a priority list of their top 10 to 15 patterns. Every time one appeared on a list, it got 5 points. So that then got rated, and that's the order of how it got rated in the small groups. What's interesting is that out of those top 16, 12 of them are exactly the same, right? So that's a lot of overlap between what people individually and what people collectively thought was most important. This isn't going to be the be-all and end-all of like the design for your school. This is just gives us the tools to talk to your teachers and your administrators about, and your community, about what it is we're trying to do and what's important to you. I'm going to show you the highest priority design patterns that were prioritized in the small groups. And I'm going to do this, I have 21. I have 3 sets of 7. So I'm going to go through each one. I'm not going to spend more than about 30 seconds on each one. If you want to interact with it and put a heart or thumbs up or a thumbs down, then it's always good for us to have a sense of what people are thinking. And then after every 7, I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell us which one out of those 7 or which ones you were most excited about, okay? So first I'm going to move this. All right. So the first one, and a lot of them are kind of no-brainers, right? But the first one is just welcoming arrival. Don't get caught up in if you like the design or not of or the particular colors or the design, whether it's too modern or whatever. It's more like the approach. So welcoming arrival means that there are clear sight lines, that you know where to enter the building, that it looks inviting, that it looks safe, that there's a place to get out of the rain and the snow. It's always nice to have some planting and some seating. And of course, it's connected to a safe drop-off sequence as well and a whole entry sequence. And then secure features. We're going to be thinking about security inside and outside the school. One of the main things is having a secure entry, right? And one point of entry that is tightly controlled. So you have a sense of when you're entering the building that yes, people are watching here. We know who's coming in. Nobody can come in the building that doesn't belong here, right? So that could be a double lock entry. It could be maybe if your student forgets their lunch, you don't even have to go into the school. There's just like a bank window and you can just hand the lunch. Maybe you have to walk through after the school is closed. You have to walk through the whole administrative suite to even enter the school. So all different ways that we can do it. Passive and active measures of security. Wayfinding and streetscape. So the idea here is that you're not just looking down miles of hallways lined with lockers that look very institutional and that all look the same, right? That actually, as you're moving through the building, there are places that have different identities, different color patterns, views in and out of places, nice graphics. So it actually feels like you're walking through a community that has distinct identity, and you can orient yourself in the building. Now, this is a big part of universal design approach as well, to make a building truly accessible, because for people with different visual needs and mobility needs, you also want to make it easy to navigate through the building. So many times we walk through school buildings and we have no idea where we are and we get lost. It's very disorienting, right? So you can use color, pattern, views in and out of things to create streetscapes. Safe community access. So this on the left-hand side, that's West Bridgewater Middle High School. It's actually about 8 years old now. And where you see that oval, that's the gym, the cafe, the auditorium, the band, and they also have cable access TV. This can be completely locked off here and here after hours. So the whole academic wing is completely inaccessible, and you have an intact community center that is an incredible resource for the community. And that is they definitely rent out that space. It connects to they also have a beautiful courtyard that is used, an internal courtyard. So safe community access. We can even think about a separate access point for the community after hours, or it could be through the main entry where we block off other areas. Whoop. Agile classrooms. That just means flexible classrooms. Your classrooms are about 700 square feet here, and you have relatively small classes, which is amazing, small class sizes. But the classroom sizes in a MSBA high school or middle school are generally between 850 and 950 square feet, so they're considerably bigger. Now, we don't want to, I got that comment about let's make it still feel intimate, right? But it also gives you a lot more flexibility. So in terms of the kinds of things you do. So we'll talk about that. But other aspects of an agile classroom are modular ergonomic furniture, really good storage, maybe sliding whiteboards and lots of storage in behind them. Sometimes we might have movable walls. These are not the kind of movable walls that we might be used to, like the accordion ones or whatever, where you can hear everything on the other side. These have really good sound qualities, so they're really like a solid sheetrock wall. They're expensive. We wouldn't do that unless maybe we do it in a couple of places, because if you want to have, for instance, someone mentioned different performance venues. How about instead of 2 800 square foot or 900 square classrooms, you suddenly have 1,800 square feet of space because you just open it up for an exhibition at night or for a performance. Or maybe you're doing some team teaching, an integrated project or something like that. So we think about that kind of stuff in terms of flexibility. Extended learning areas. These are what would otherwise be hallways. Hallways take up 30% of the square footage in your building, and they're generally useless. And when we walk through a lot of schools, kids are actually working in the hallways, but very uncomfortably. They're just sitting on the floor, backs against the wall on their laptops, right? So how about furnishing those spaces, maybe making them a little bit bigger in some areas, and having them connect to the idea of a classroom neighborhood, so it really has a sense of place. Now again, we don't want to have big open spaces that aren't being used, so we're going to make sure that we talk to you all about, you know, what's appropriate for how many or where to have spaces like this. But this connects to the idea of classroom neighborhoods. So when we think about a hallway just lined with lockers and classrooms, and the doors to the classrooms are closed and you can't see in, that's very anonymous. This is West Bridgewater again, and this is the middle school portion of the school because it's a middle high school. So the 7th and 8th grade have these learning neighborhoods because they work cross-discipline. And what you can see here is a team room, a small team room. It's about the size of a classroom. And then there's a teacher planning area. These are all windows with views out into this area, special education rooms and bathrooms, and then some small breakout rooms. So you've got all these different spaces all co-located. It becomes a neighborhood, and it takes on an identity. So that's something that we think about. It's like the sum is greater than the parts. This one is more of a high school example where it's a little bit more like Google. And some schools are going that approach where they have, you know, they might have their tech lab, their Project Lead the Way lab. They have some breakout spaces where kids can use technology. If we're trying to get kids to be more independent, we have to be able to let them not out of our sight, but give them a little space to work more independently. So those are things that we'll talk to you all about in terms of what's most appropriate. So that was the first 7. So this is different than the other ones that I showed you because don't press the button until you're ready there's only one chance here to submit. So what you're gonna see on your screens here is you can drag these and put them in different order based on what's most important to you. So it's just interesting for us to kind of get a sense of when you look at these 7 that I just shared, what stands out as like, yeah, that would be great to have. So again, you should be able to see these on your screen and drag them and put them in order of what's your greatest priority. Once you have them in the order you want them, just press the button. We're going to see a graph start to populate here. So we've had 11 people respond. I'll leave, or 12 now. I'm not sure what our base is, 14. We'll leave it up for another minute or so. Right up at the top, secure entry and safe community access, welcoming arrival, and then kind of all kind of equal to each other, extended learning, wayfinding, agile classrooms. We're going to be thinking about all of these things. It's not like by rating them higher. Again, we're just trying to get a sense of what people are most excited about. All right. Are we ready to move on to the next set? I think it looks like everybody's okay. All right. So set number 2, breakout and quiet spaces. So some of those spaces might be breakout spaces that are like extended learning spaces that are more open. Some of them might be more like a conference area, or here's a breakout space between 2 classrooms that are shared by 2 classrooms, or just a conference room, or a small group room. And we definitely put more of these into schools than we used to, because it's a great space for testing, for de-escalation if a kid is having a really bad day, for doing small group work, for meetings, for individual education IEP meetings. So definitely thinking about spreading those throughout the school to give you more flexibility about the type of spaces that you have access to. The heart of the school. So often you go to a school and there's no there, right? So oftentimes, especially when we're doing a new school, we'd like to have a space that's really centrally located that feels like the heart of the school. It's like the town square. It's usually the cafe, the cafeteria, right? That's a multi-purpose space, but it's also maybe surrounded by other things. And it's where you build whole school community. It's also where you might have larger gatherings or events at night, things like that. So people in the educational visioning group rated this one very highly. They really like the idea of a heart of school. The Media Center Learning Commons also got rated very highly. And as I said, Media Center Learning Commons is now a place for books and for also more collaborative work, so quiet work, collaborative work, access to technology, breakout rooms. So we want to see a variety of different ways that space can be used. Enrichment spaces, these are all your spaces like your art, your music, your weight room, your gym, your performance spaces. Oftentimes we think about black box theaters and performance spaces that are really flexible in middle school environments. And we want to make sure that these enrichment spaces, to whatever extent possible, are very centrally located, so you don't have to walk from one end of the school to the other. So when we do a new school, what we often do is we have this set of core spaces at the middle, and then all of the classrooms kind of radiate around it, right? That's kind of the spoken wheel framework. Career tech education. Now, you don't have Chapter 74 programs like Blackstone Valley, but there's definitely an interest in the career technical programming that exists here and that the school would like to develop. So we'll be thinking about that. And we also want to be thinking about spaces that can be used flexibly as well in the future if those career pathways evolve, as they evolve in different ways, as careers evolve. We want to be able to make sure that they can be used in some different ways. STEM, STEAM, and makerspaces. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So it's just like a very interdisciplinary approach to doing engineering design. It's like the Project Lead the Way program that you have here. And oftentimes those spaces are just like big table surfaces with a lot of storage around the perimeter for the materials. Academic and CTE pathways. This is kind of like the classroom neighborhoods we saw. But just thinking about, well, if you're going to have these career pathways, maybe those lab spaces should be integrated with your classroom spaces in a way that makes sense so that they're co-located in a way that they become sort of first of all, there's adjacencies that make it easy to collaborate, but also they have a certain identity as a career pathway. So that was that set of 7. So we can rate these. Then we just got one more set, and we'll open up for Q&A. All right, so, well, a lot of people like a lot of different things, but heart of school kind of taking the lead there at the top, STEM and STEAM, and then kind of even, for career tech, media center, enrichment, breakout. All right. And a lot of these are very connected to each other, as we said. So I'm going to do one more set. Outdoor connections and learning. So that could be a courtyard. It could be an outdoor classroom. The lower left-hand picture there shows a garage door from a makerspace that goes right out into an outdoor platform where you can build some larger projects. Maybe there's a garden, more informal areas for students to converge, maybe areas for dining outside. And biophilic design is sort of connected to the outdoors, but it's more bringing the outdoors in through views to nature or the use of natural materials or graphics. A lot of times we see those big planters and stuff like that, lots of greenery. But we can think about wood and natural materials. And there's a lot of studies that show, too, that this is a very calming thing for students and teachers and increases student performance. Anywhere, anytime learning, the idea that it's not just in the classroom, but learning can happen outside. It can happen in these sort of more informal areas. There are areas throughout the school where small groups can work and gather, and the whole campus, every square inch of the building becomes a learning environment. But also knowing that there needs to be supervision. So, that's, and teachers are very conscious of that. So there needs to be visibility. So part of connected to anytime, anywhere learning is that there's a good amount of transparency in certain places where you can kind of make sure that you're monitoring what's going on. Display and exhibition, 2D, 3D display, not just of athletic trophies are great, and we want to have a good place for those, but also let's display artwork, let's display academic work, and really kind of celebrate the learning that's going on. And so that, again, the idea that the school becomes like a blank slate and there are lots of venues for display. Branding and identity, You don't have to like this particular aesthetic. This is actually a school in Los Angeles that has, it's a communications, design, and science, three small high schools all co-located. They each have their own color scheme and materials palette and identity. You can use graphics to do that as well. And it's something that when we think about renovating a school and giving it a facelift, that's also something we think about, is using color and patterns to do that. Community aesthetic, not to say that this is your aesthetic, but we'll talk with you about what is appropriate for you, both interior and exterior aesthetic, what's going to really feel like, wow, this belongs to the community and we can relate to it and feel proud of it. And lastly, effective storage. Storage for students and storage for teachers within the classroom. And we definitely are rethinking how lockers are done. And a lot of your lockers, they're so narrow, they're not usable, right? So if we do have lockers, oftentimes it's the athletic lockers that are used the most. And oftentimes in high schools, we just have itinerant lockers where kids can use them if they need them, but not every kid is assigned a locker, right? So that's one possibility. But the thing about lockers is they take a lot of space and they're very institutional and they're really expensive. So we want to think carefully about how we approach that with you. So that's it. That's the last set. It's like outdoor connections and learning right up at the top, community aesthetic, display and exhibition. All right. Leave this up for another 15 seconds. I think we had 21 last time. Okay, there we go. All right. I have 2 more slides before we close and open up for a Q&A. Please share your personal favorite design patterns here. And you should be able to see a list of all the things that I just went through. So, oh, wait a minute, before you do that. Let me see if I can. Okay. This is going to be better. It'll be a word cloud. So the way word clouds work is you need to make sure that you're spelling it correctly. And if you want it to get bigger, you need to use the exact same spelling as the other people when you see a word come up. It gets bigger the more times that you do it. Someone's interested in STEM? Yeah, and you can make up your own design patterns here too. You don't have to use the list that I gave you. right, well, you can see the ones that have gotten bigger, maybe not the smaller ones, right? Secure entry, community outdoor connections, safe community access, welcoming arrival. All right, leave this up for another 15 seconds or so. And then I have one other prompt, which is so you can start thinking about it if you finish with this. And that is to share one or more blue sky aspirational ideas, something that you would love to see in this new or renovated building. And it could be a space or quality of space, the type of what you'd like it to look like, how you'd like it to feel, or particular spaces. And you can be as aspirational as you want here, no holds barred. All right, so we'll. And you can share more than one if you want. So more club areas and water features, pride of community, military recognition wall for graduates, athletic complex, visual accessibility, multi-use sports space, football stadium, electric shop class, athletic complex, turf fields, stadium setting with lights and adjacent locker rooms, better water fountains, labs for hands-on learning, community space with garden, state-of-the-art occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech room. You will definitely have that. A filtered water system. All right. Okay. So I think we're gonna wrap this up, but feel free to keep riffing on this if you want, add as much as you want. We're gonna wrap up and open up for Q&A. I did realize, Jim, I thought maybe you and Angel could just introduce yourself because they're part of the design team and you're gonna see them. Oh, you introduced? Oh, you did. I'm sorry. I was busy eating pizza. That was not doing my job, right? All right. So, thank you for. I hope that got you a little bit excited about the potential here. Those were mostly schools that have been designed and built in Massachusetts. I will say that I do work all around the country, and there is no other state that is as thoughtful as Massachusetts in doing their new schools. And to get into the MSBA system is really great, and to get into their pipeline, to have them as a funding partner, because they've got a lot of experience and they're willing to do really creative stuff. So, all right, questions? Yeah.
I actually have two quick
Okay, I'm gonna give this to Ryan. So.
Sure, thanks. I actually have two quick questions. The first is actually probably a budget funding money question. It came up a lot in the slides that people are looking for a better athletic field, maybe multi-use field, stadiums, locker rooms. Is that typically looked at with building funding? Or like as far as, field renovations or anything external to the building, would funding something like that be included in the monies that we're getting from the state and anything like that to update or build a new building? Or would that have to be looked at as a separate funding project?
The state program allows a certain percentage of the budget for site work. So depending on what it is that you do, it would fall under that. It doesn't use the same percentage as the building itself. So there's few limitations on what you can build. There's a limitation on how much they will contribute to it. Did you have a second question, or?
I did.
Okay. Trade you.
So, and the second one I know is probably going to be more along the lines of detailed design and layout and schematics, but another two big topics that came up, one was secure entry, and then the other was outdoor educational spaces. So I guess my question there is, if you could just briefly cover some of the ways that you can address both a secure entry, secure campus, secure facility, while at the same time having those outdoor spaces, how maybe some ways you've addressed that. Because in my mind, looking at a very secure entry and then having a big pavilion out back where people can just walk around the school and go out back seems to be counterintuitive. So just nothing real detailed, just high level.
The basic approach is to have an accountability for everyone who comes onto the campus and where they may go. So it's not a matter of not having doors in and out of the building. It's a matter of knowing when the door has been opened and when it's been closed, and to a finer degree, who opened and closed it. So you could have a classroom that is down near the outside field, and that teacher would call into the main office and say, I'm going to take my class outside. Their classroom door would open, it would show up on the computer, the door would close, and they would go out. If the door were jammed open or pried open so that someone else could get in, it would sound an alarm in the main office. As far as the campus itself goes, this campus actually doesn't work too badly for that, because your main entry by vehicle is at the front. Where this campus falls down a bit is you can't really connect visually with the front. So we follow what's called community protection through environmental design. CPTED is the acronym for it. The back part of the campus can be secure through fencing and through, well, the stream helps. Crossing the stream is difficult. You have a residential piece along the back. There's the way to get access to this campus through the main entrance, and then to the back would have to come through the building. So we would design the campus and integral with the building more so than was done when these were originally designed. This was set up, the fields were down there, you could access them out of the other neighborhoods, and you could come in and out. Now our approach is to make it a single point of entry that can be controlled during the school day.
I would say also, just to add to that, that West Bridgewater example that I showed has that interior courtyard, and where they have the garage door from their robotics lab that opens up into the courtyard. It's all internal. And they actually encourage students to navigate through, all those doors are unlocked in the interior courtyard. And they encourage students to use it even during the winter, like walk to and from classes to get outside.
Also, along with, we talked about secure entry, but there wasn't anything about security in the classrooms or anything. Is that stuff that's already like built in with all schools going forward? They have to meet XYZ standards for security in the classrooms, or is there talk about what that would include?
I'm not entirely sure where you're at, but if it's in terms of shelter in place, there are design approaches to sheltering in place. The main thing is to make people who are responsible for the classroom in a lockdown situation. So you try to avoid having to go and lock the door. Put the phone where someone can get to it where they can't be seen from the door. Have a place where the class can shelter in place that's away from the door. The hardware that's used on doors in schools now is set to always be locked from the hallway side and always openable from the inside. So depending on what your response is, you can get out of the classroom if you need to, or you can shelter in place and be safe. Communication now takes a number of different protocols, either cellular or over a hard wire. Virtually all the schools now have a lockdown call that goes immediately to the police department. And all of our review as we go through the design involves the police department and their second responder. So if it's the state police or another local police, they're involved in the response planning. And response planning also includes the fire department and the emergency medical, because the last thing you want is for someone to block up a driveway, have an emergency fire truck respond and then have an incident inside the school where the police don't know how to get past that incident. So it's a fairly comprehensive planning, and it's gone all the way up and been incorporated at state legislation level. Between MSBA and the state legislature and the state police have talked about how best to program this. It's also an area that as we get further into it, you won't see it happen. We don't publish that in public for obvious reasons. Everything else about this process you'll find except the security for the school. Anybody else? Nope, there you go.
Thank you. So I have a question about like the building itself. So in the beginning of the slides, when you guys had shown if it were 9 through 12 or 8 through 12, whatever, and those numbers, they seem very small for like, it was like 300 and something students for 4 grades. My concern with this is there any type of study or was there any type of study done to like somewhat forecast what we think grades will have as far as enrollments? Only because I know Franklin, they had built their new school and their first year, the kids couldn't even all fit in the cafeteria. So it's like, if we're gonna spend all this money, we wanna make sure our kids have room in the school. So I'm just curious on that.
Sure. When we did the master plan, we did a demographic and enrollment study. And you do demographics in addition to enrollment because demographics tell you how the towns are growing and enrollment tells you how the schools are trending. That was then updated. You guys updated, right? Updated it, submitted that to the state, and you have now exceeded those updated numbers. So they do seem small, and we are well aware of that, as is Jason's team and as is Collier's. So all the team members are aware of that, and we are formulating a strategy to start to talk to the state about that. The state has a tendency to be a little bit hard of hearing on this aspect. So the sooner we start, the better off we'll be. But yeah, we are definitely aware of that.
Right, so on the 8 through 12, the grade span 8 through 12, we're listed at 470 kids. That's what's in here right now. We have about just under 540. So there's already a 60, 70 student difference on the plus side.
Yeah.
So to that point, we're engaging with MSBA again to look at that.
And I just feel like so many people here, it's more cost effective and things like that. So it's like younger families coming in. It's like by the time our kids get to this high school, are they even gonna have room?
Well, they're moving here for the schools.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We have an amazing school system.
I'm not even going to try to top that one.
There is the if you build it, they will come, and they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thank you all for coming out. This is, as Jason and David said, not the last time you'll be asked to engage in the process as it moves along. So keep in touch with everybody. You can certainly reach over to central administration, let them know what you want to do. And I do know that unbeknownst to Jason, I had offered that if someone wanted to walk through the school, either reach over to your office or to Jill's and see if you can take a walk through the school. If you're interested in what a 55-year-old high school looks like, come back and take a walk through. Thank you all.